Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spaces Between. Today, I have on Holly Forman, who is a fantastic therapist and colleague friend of mine that I met while we were both working at an outpatient center in West LA, treating individuals struggling with substance abuse and dual diagnosis. I'm so excited to have Holly on today. And I brought her on for a variety of reasons. Number one, we're both extremely passionate about the birthing process. We're going to go into that, our births. And then also, number two, and amongst many other things, ketamine therapy in the postpartum period, as well as IFS. And we're just going to talk all the things healing and women and birthing. And yes, hi, Holly.
Yes. Hi, Gina. I'm so excited to talk about all of this with you.
Yes, we're gonna go there. And as you and I were sort of chit-chatting a little bit before this, let's just dive into the birthing process right now. And
Yes.
you chose to have a home birth,
Mm-hmm.
which I would say in America in particular, a lot. I'll speak to my experience a bit. When I was choosing to go the home birth route, there
Yeah.
were a lot of individuals that were fearful of it. Some people thought it was even a dangerous choice, so I really had to kind of stick to my bearings and be in my power when making that decision to work with a midwife. So for you, what made you choose a home birth? And yeah, let's just talk
Yeah.
about that.
Well, first, I can feel my insides just boil when you say dangerous, because I think there's such a misconception around home birth. And honestly, I think it's like people just fear what they don't know or what feels out of control. And in my opinion, birth is not really something to be controlled, it's something to be experienced. And okay, in preparation for this, I reached out to my midwife because I wanted to get some some facts and like some information that I could share because I'm so passionate about this. And it's so first of all, I just want to say that home birth it's not actually a trend. I know right now people think it's kind of like this trendy thing to do and it's what all the new age, like granola kind of people are doing, but it's so home birth, I mean, birthing at home has been the norm. Like only since the 1950s has home birth been the major or has hospital birth rather been the majority. So, in the beginning of the 1900s, 100% of births happened at home. So it's more that hospital birth is the trendier, newer thing. And it's it's actually not dangerous. So there was a statistic that came out in 2021 that US maternal mortality rates are on the rise 40%, which is like back to where it was in 1965. So just because people are birthing in the hospitals doesn't mean it's safe, right? Like this is referring to hospital births. So it's actually a lot of times safer, dare I say. I'm nervous to say this because I want to take into account that, of course, people who have home births are usually lower risk. If someone was high risk, they're not able to do a home birth. So, of course, we need to include that in the conversation. But my midwife always puts out statistics of her C-section rates, for example. And I don't know what year this is from. It's either last year or the year before, but like her C-section rate was under 3%. And I looked up my local hospital, which is in Newport Beach, which is, a nice area where there's good healthcare, and it was over 25%. So it makes me wonder, Okay, so I know I kind of feel like I'm going on a tangent with this, but am I answering your question?
Well, you're answering, I think, what you were. I'm going to go back to when you were feeling in your body big feelings around when I said, when I first chose to do a home birth, that there was a lot of fear and this kind of, and people saying that it was a dangerous choice. And the safer choice was to be in the hospital. And I think, and again, Holly and I right now want to be mindful of every mother, woman listening to this, that birth is unpredictable, right?
Yes.
And gnarly things can happen both in a home birth and in a hospital birth. But I think the narrative that's really been continued to be carried out is that home birthing is just not the safer option. And it's not. And so I think what you and I are talking about and what you're not even necessarily refuting, but you're just bringing some of the statistics and talking with your midwife. Because I think as you and I were chatting a bit about this before, right, it's also a big, I don't want to keep using the word narrative, but keeping women in their power, right? So keeping women in their power versus, well, the only option for you is to go about X, Y, and Z with hospital birthing, and that there are more options to it. And I think for you, if you could just talk about, when you chose your midwife, which I also think is really important, right? Choosing a midwife that has right? That's huge. I did a lot of research on that, and choosing somebody with extensive experience and somebody that you sit down and you talk about any of the, I guess you could say, kind of code red experiences that they've had at a home birth and how they've dealt with it. So I guess I just want to put that out there, is that we're not refuting or saying that scary things or near-death experiences might not happen in the home, but also that home birthing can be an extremely safe and beautiful and empowering experience. And I'm just curious if you would be open, you can also reflect on that, but also if you'd be open to your journey of choosing your midwife and sort of the steps and everything moving into your home birth.
Yeah. Yes. And I also, what you were saying about, things can happen home birth or hospital. Like I understand that not everyone even can have the privilege or that opportunity to have a home birth, and it just can't be for everybody because of circumstances and health risks and all of that. But my process in that, and speaking of choosing a midwife, it reminds me almost of like how you choose a therapist. It has to be a felt sense and a connection. It's such an intimate, vulnerable relationship. So I wish I had a better answer for you around how I came to choose a home birth, but it was a knowing. I just knew years before I even started to conceive. I had actually reached out to this midwife. I was living in LA at the time, and I had no idea if Orange County midwives even existed. I thought maybe it would only be an LA thing, but I knew my husband and I's plan was to move back to Orange County because that's where we were both from, and we wanted to raise a family near our families. And so me being the planner, I'm like, okay, well, do I need to have a home birth in LA, or can I find an OC midwife? So I reached out to one and said, hey, I wanted to know how much it cost. Like, was it even feasible financially? Was this only for really wealthy people? I really didn't know. So I was information gathering, and it turns out that it worked out, and she ended up being our midwife, even after interviewing several others. And we also looked into a birthing center. So first, I just feel like the preparation that I put into it was extensive. I really want to encourage moms to put in that preparation into the birthing process, because it's like, yeah, taking the power back in a way, and not just handing it over to who we think we can and should trust, which is the medical institution or doctors. Not to say that there's not a time and a place to trust that, there certainly is. And like, thank God for Western medicine for some things. But for me, I chose home birth because I wanted something that I was more in control of it. Like, I wanted the freedom, I wanted the autonomy, I wanted the choice. I love that midwifery doesn't look at pregnancy as a medical problem that needs to be solved, but it's a natural process that is guided by the mother. Like, my midwife always says, I'm not delivering your baby, you are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So tell me, where am I going on more tangents?
No. This is fantastic. And I think you spoke of something which really hit home for me. And I also talked about it in my last episode, which is a knowing with a capital K, right?
Yeah.
So I think for some women, maybe there's a deep knowing of hospital birth just feels more comfortable, and that feels like the option for them. For you, you had a deep knowing within you. Some might say this is your soul space, right? Of this was the way that you were going to go. So, and then within that, though, listening to you and talking about your major preparation for birth. Whereas, again, now I'm going to be so careful when I say this, but sometimes I've often heard, and every woman, and again, because I so believe this, every woman is allowed to make any choice that she wants. If you're like, you know what, I'm signing up for a C-section, or I'm signing up for that epidural, I don't give a shit, right? That is their experience. And something I also talked about in the episode before is feminine wounding and how we need not shame any woman for their choices. But I think also, but speaking to, again, this space of knowing and listening to yourself, but within that, you didn't just willy-nilly, I'm going to have a home birth, right?
Not
I'm just
one bit.
Yeah, I'm going to show up the day of and like, let's do the damn thing. You were prepping what I would say probably was, your mental, emotional, spiritual, your whole system for the experience. But that's not to say that you controlled it, right? But you were prepping for it.
Yes. It's so funny because I feel like birth, and I think you even mentioned this in your last episode on motherhood, that birth is psychedelic.
Yeah.
And the pregnancy is the prep, and parenthood is the integration.
Yeah.
And it's so, it goes so in alignment with this psychedelic experience. And I just think whether you're doing a home birth or a hospital birth, or home birth turns hospital, or it's a planned C-section, whatever it is, I want to empower anyone maybe who's listening that wants to be a mom or is about to be a mom, that you still can put in the prep. It's not just about a home birth. I mean, there are so many choices that you can choose in a hospital or with a C-section that you're allowed to advocate for. But again, it's going back to this thing that knowledge is power. And so many people, and this isn't a judgment, it's just so many people don't know anything about birth. And it's not even something maybe that they've thought about before. And so, speaking of me having this knowing with the capital K that I wanted a home birth, you're exactly right that I didn't just go, okay, well, because I know, cool, I'm just going to go forward blindly. I researched, I read all of the books, I followed positive birthing accounts, and I watched so many natural births that my entire Instagram account was of women vaginas, like it was all sensitive topic, that you had to click accept.
Click to actually see.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But I was just filling my being with positive experiences, and it solidified my decision. And I highly recommend a book called Hypnobirthing. I don't know if you read that.
Yes.
Okay, but
Yeah.
such good information
Mhm.
and goes way beyond just what the title, leads you to think it's about. There's a lot of information just about like the power of the mind, and birth is such a mental game. I don't know how it was for you,
Oh
but
God, yes. Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah.
mental. I mean, it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's physical. It is. I wish someone would have told me how, I don't know why this wasn't obvious to me, but how physically demanding it is on your body. Like, and I was no epidural, like consciously pushing, and I had to have so much physical strength to push that that was sort of just lost on me. And
Yeah.
yes.
It is, what I would say was, because as I listened to you, the similarity in there was so much prep. And even though I went into a hospital birth, based on how late Carlo was,
Yeah.
that prep of, again, all of the mental and being able to, when it was so overwhelming and it was so intense, and being able to breathe and being able to speak to myself in a way that I could keep going,
Yeah.
was really profound. It was,
I'm
and
sure.
yeah,
Like,
but I know, as birthing takes a woman into just pure warrior. Like, you're in the most primal, like, I mean, I made noises that I didn't think were actually possible. I don't know.
same.
Yeah.
Primal is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yes.
you nailed that.
Yeah. It-
Yeah. And I thought that I would be nervous or uncomfortable, but all of that goes out the window when you're in it. You do not you're in I went to another dimension, truthfully. I was in the spirit realm. It, like, really, you're connected for that transition time. I was, at least, like, you go to just another place that is, I don't know if there's anything else that can take you to that depth other than maybe death or
yeah.
being near someone that is dying. It's like you're, I think, connected to this spiritual realm.
Can you describe a little bit, if you can? I know sometimes these experiences, it's almost like when a client comes back to me and they've done ayahuasca and they're like, Gina, I can't even put words on the entire experience, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for you, when you were in that spiritual realm that you felt it was kind of maybe similar to death, what was that for you? What was that like?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like hard to even put myself back there. I remember thinking I'm either dying or I'm going to die, or I'm going to survive. There's only two options. Like, and I had to push past so many layers, and I really think I was dying in a way. Like, you are not the same person after giving birth, and I don't think I was entirely prepared for that. But it's to me, it's like your old self is dying off. And I was not only birthing my son, but I was birthing myself as a mother. And that was just, I mean, I can't even describe it any other way than that.
I mean, well, when you were speaking about when you were in that space, and a lot of women, and myself included, when you experienced the trance like space in birth, but when you were saying, well, either I was going to die or I was going to survive, right? And so to be on that precipice as a human and again, that commitment that you just kept going and you really stayed open to it, right? You surrendered.
Surrender. Yeah.
Yeah. To just, as you said, I mean, it hits all of the different realms: energetic, physical, emotional. And then you also spoke to, in the dying of self and then becoming a mother. So, and feeling like maybe there was a little bit more. I like that you bring up the psychedelic journey in comparison to birth, right? And then later, integration zone. So after you gave birth to your son, and you were laying there, and then in the days that followed, what were some of the new, if you can remember, right, the new feelings, the new thoughts of yourself or life, or what you had just gone through?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my first thing I think I said, or shortly after, was, I'm never doing that again. Like, but also I could not believe that I had just done that.
Yeah.
I mean, I pushed a 9-pound, 7-ounce baby out of my freaking vagina in my bedroom. Like, what the hell? And also, it was the first time, honestly, I ever think I could truly confidently say that I was proud of myself. Like, I am like, yes, I am proud. And I will say that from like the mountaintops.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it was something that I did entirely. Like, I mean, I had so much support, but it was something that only I could do for me. There was no saving that, it was my journey.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, part of what was so beautiful too about having a home birth is moments after, I was just right in my bed in the comfort of home. I don't think my baby's name is West. I don't think he left me for days.
Wow.
Like, there was barely any separation, which was just such an important thing to me, that we were so connected.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I think that, like, I honestly am still integrating the new version of me and me being a mother. And there are still moments where I grieve my old self, knowing like I will never get that part of me back in some ways. But that is a piece that I don't know if anyone can really prepare you for that.
Yeah.
I don't think I was prepared for that though.
And when you say for that, for just the profound transformation of self, like that.
Yes.
Yes.
For birthing a new identity, kind of like thinking of your identity as a mom as this baby too, right? And you're like, you have to nurture this thing that in you, like, okay, how do I let this motherhood version of me grow and become a person? It's a being, a new part of me. And that is what I think is a thing a lot of new moms struggle with, and something maybe that we as like a culture or society don't talk as much about, but I think is so, so important.
Yeah. I mean, and even, I've never said it this way, but, in the West, particularly, and, you and I were white American women, there's not a lot of exposure to ritual and rites of passage and, really honoring these spaces they truly are. They're almost like, the only way I can say, it's like an explosion, right? It's like this explosion of self, explosion of your consciousness. You almost feel somewhat fragmented, but then again, the kind of, I'm going to say the word again, the narrative or the story told and what we see through social media and even through friends, it's just like, well, I'm a mom now and I've got this baby and, we're just doing the thing. And yeah, I'll never forget when a girlfriend said to me, it was a few weeks before I gave birth, and she said, Gina, you should have some sort of ceremony with your girlfriends before you, I believe it was either before, I can't remember, or after birth, but you bury an item that's related to you of your old self. And everybody, it'll make me cry. And everybody around buries and supports that because you're
I
not,
love that.
right?
Yes, I
And
love that.
yeah, and I think because it's so, as I cry. Well, and your sharing was just so beautiful, I mean, it's just like, again, this reminder of a woman being fully in her power. And that also takes a huge commitment to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I
I
wipe,
know you're making me get teary too. Well, it's just, yeah, I love that idea of having kind of a burial for your old self. And it's just making me think, I think sometimes people, go like, well, why the hell would you want to do that?
yeah.
Why would you want to feel that intensity? Why would you want to have this explosion that when you can like have the choice to just numb it or schedule around it and avoid it completely and be kind of on meds so you're unaware partly. But I think there's just something beautiful and important and meaningful and powerful about doing birth consciously, being conscious of the whole process. Because I don't know, you were just making me thinking about like in our society, how we kind of just go like, well, I'm just doing the thing. Like we just kind of brush over things and we don't really like things that are messy or hard or painful. And it's kind of like that with birth. Like I think sometimes we think, well, if we could like numb it or make it less messy or more like in control and planned and nice and neat, that's better. But I think there's something important to embrace the messiness and the out of control and the raw. And like we said, the primal, it's like, this is, it's important to be conscious of, especially birthing yourself and your new identity. Like to me, it's important to be conscious of that, and kind of like makes me think too about parenting. Like, well, have you heard that saying, if you think parenting's hard, then you're doing it right? And it's like that with birth too. It's like, well, it's supposed to be hard, like it's supposed to be wild and raw and messy. And, you
Yeah.
don't need to numb that.
Yeah. 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 But I'm sure, as you're speaking about the numbness and whatnot, I'm sure there's some women that are listening right now, because I always try to look at all the sides, right?
Yes.
Where some women maybe would feel shamed and I'm not saying, Holly, you're shaming anybody, but I think we should just
No,
kind of like
yes, let's talk about that,
talk
because
about
that's
all.
never my intention.
Yeah, no, and of course not. But I guess I just kind of want to name it because
Yeah.
I've also had some girlfriends who were like, yep, going in, getting the epidural, and then walked out and they were like, that was a beautiful experience. That was a transformative, it's what needed to happen for them. Right. And so I
I
guess,
believe it.
and that's what I always come back to with all sides of it, right? Home birthing, hospital, is just advocating for yourself and knowing what you want in your life and what do I even want to say with that? There's so many thoughts. I mean, this could be like a 4-hour
I
podcast.
know. Well, I want to, oh no, you go ahead.
Well, and I was just thinking about, I've spoken with several friends and even clients who went days in their home birth, like days. And it slowed and slowed. And we've had these big conversations of kind of like almost like a little bit of like spiritual shaming of self. And I experienced this, where I was like, God damn it, Carla, why are you not coming on time, right, to that due date? As you and I were talking about before this, that sort of looming due date and what that energetic pressure, what that does to a woman. Again, it's so complicated. And I think some of these women and friends that I've talked to, there's also this interesting side of, well, was I not in my power? And that's why it took 3-4 days. And then I had to transfer to the hospital birth, and I didn't get to have that explosive God moment that, as what you're talking about, what you experienced, right? So yeah, again, it's so big. So I think maybe that's why I'm losing my words.
Yes. Well, there's so much to say.
Right?
Yeah. I know. I want to say too that home birth is not for everybody.
Yeah.
I get that. And I think that's why I always go back to knowledge. It's getting the information and, like you said, advocating for yourself. But you can't advocate if you don't know, right? And so just empowering yourself with the information so that you can make the choice for yourself of what you want, and coming back to your own intuition. It's trusting your body and what your heart wants. It's such an individual process. And I also read this book on babies and spirit babies coming into the world. And just to throw in another layer, it's also not even all about you, because it's also about the baby and what their soul is needing and what type of birth they're needing. So it's also surrendering to that. Like, birth isn't, you have a plan and then also throw it out the window.
Well, I think that's what it was really interesting. At one point, I told my midwife, I said, Carney, I feel like I'm in a power struggle with Carlo.
Yeah.
And it was really like, Holly, it was fucking wild. Like, there was a certain point where I could feel myself like, hey, little dude, like, I'm really gently trying to nudge you out of here with acupuncture and cervical sweeps and all the things. But it was like a general just no, like, I'm not coming. And, and it was, again, and I talked about this in the last episode.
Yes, I'm remembering this I got fired up.
Well, and I just, it was so many things. Like, it was a lesson in humility. It was also a lesson in how fucked up due dates are. I'm just going to say it. They just are. And it was a total surrender to also, and my ego. It was an explosion of my ego of like, Gina, you're not in control of the birthing process. And you could prep and read all the motherfucking books that you want, which they did help me in birth. But still, there was a plan that was also out of my hands, and we could go into the deeper sort of medical model that I also think got in the way of that, in the sense of my midwife and the fear surrounding us of actually going 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And then in my journey, I've met other women who've gone past 3 weeks and they delivered a beautiful, healthy baby and everything was fine. There was no need for induction. But again, I want to be careful with that because of stillbirths and things getting complicated and going wrong. But
you just don't know.
You don't know. And I think, and again, that's what I talked about in the last one, was just, it's the balance, right? So it's this balance of a woman being in her power, gaining knowledge, advocating, and then also surrendering to the complete unknown, divine, just whatever we want to say, design of all of it, right?
Yeah. It's all about surrender. It's right. It's, how do you hold these two opposite things of planning and surrender? And both are so important.
Right? But that's the paradox of being alive, right?
It is.
We experience pain, we experience pleasure, we experience, suffering and joy, all of the things. And I love that you brought that up, though. The planning, holding, planning, and surrender, which the Virgo type A OCD just person in me was like, No, but anywho, so I think you and I could go on and on about
I
this.
know. I just looked at the time.
I know. And I was like, oh, maybe. Okay. Let's quickly, well, not quickly. We have a little bit of time, but I do want to talk about your choice to do ketamine therapy in the postpartum period and what brought you to make that choice to do ketamine.
Sure. So I didn't exactly choose ketamine therapy because I was in postpartum and
Okay.
wanted support.
Okay.
I wanted to offer psychedelics to clients. And I had been following the MDMA MAPS studies for a while now and have been really excited about one day being able to offer MDMA to clients because I think that's a beautiful thing and it's going to do a lot of healing. How ketamine came into the picture, I kind of say that ketamine found me because I was 6 months postpartum and I got an email from this company called Journey Clinical that works with ketamine. They are kind of a middleman that connects therapists with prescribers. And so they're filling the piece because they really believe in the therapeutic component of ketamine and all psychedelic treatment. So why ketamine? Well, anyways, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, you're a therapist. Are you interested in providing ketamine therapy?" And I had never thought about it because I've only heard of ketamine IV infusion clinics that are for treatment resistant depression. It was more of a medical model. I didn't really know that it would be something I could offer in a therapy setting. But they told me otherwise. So I started to research it and then decided I was interested after researching and learning more about it. Did some trainings on it and also knew that it aligned really nicely with IFS. Well, really all psychedelic experiences can align with IFS as a modality. So I happened to be, I think by the time I did my first CAP session myself, I was like 7 or 8 months postpartum. And I would never offer something that I didn't do myself. So to me, that feels unethical. And if I was ever suggesting that someone do this, I would suggest to them to ask their provider if what their experience is with the substance, because I do think that's really important. And to me, it's a red flag if a provider hasn't had an experience themselves. So with that, I had a couple experiences myself to see what it was like and was able to work through some of my own stuff with ketamine before offering it to clients.
Okay. Okay. Because I think obviously, this right now, there is a massive, there's like a psychedelic revolution that is maybe similar to the 60s, 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And some are claiming it's going to be bigger because it's just therapists everywhere are going to be offering not why, but you've done talk therapy. And you and I have talked about the limits of talk therapy and how did the ketamine, if you were to describe it to somebody who's never done psychedelics, what was your experience of looking at your parts of self? And did it feel safe? And did you, were you able to access areas in a deeper way than, you could have in talk therapy?
Yes. Short answer, yes.
Okay.
Every substance is different. What I'll say about ketamine is it's the gentle one is the best way I can describe it, especially the way that I do it, which is not IV or intramuscular. It's with a sublingual lozenge. So someone once described it as like IV, think about you're diving off a cliff into the ocean. And with a lozenge, you're wading into the water. So if someone was new to psychedelics, I would definitely consider ketamine as the starting point because it is gentle. It's also fast acting, like 45 minutes to an hour, and your experience is over and you're kind of out of the peak state of it. But yes, so I mean, psychedelic means mind manifesting or mind revealing, mind expanding. So it does exactly that. And it doesn't always give you what you want or think you need, but it will give you what is there.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a really beautiful thing. It might be a really hard thing or not a really pretty thing or something you want to see. But it's also, it's a journey. So there might be moments of difficulty and then you come on the other side of it.
Yeah.
That was my experience. That has been.
Okay. Okay. Well, and as you and I have talked about in this episode, right? Again, the kind of paradox and the duality of life is, I think some people just go, yeah, I'm going to do psychedelics almost lightly, right? And you're going to uncover some shadow material, and that shadow material's asking to be looked at. We can call it whatever we want, right? It doesn't have to be shadow. Some people don't like it. But
exiled parts, maybe.
Exiled parts, making the unconscious conscious. And so when you do that, that can be, right, it's sort of, as we go back to the birthing space, holding what can be painful and uncomfortable within the surrender and the space of the unknown, and knowing that you can get to this side of healing and lightness. But it's all of the things. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what ketamine does really well is it allows you, because it is a dissociative, which I think is kind of a confusing term, because yes, you're disconnected in a way from your body, but you're also more associated to your emotions and your parts. So what the disconnection, I think, does nicely is it gives you sort of safe space to go to parts that maybe feel scarier or dark or heavy. So it's a safe distance, or maybe in conscious mind, you're too scared or overwhelmed or think you're going to get flooded to go to a certain space. And so the ketamine's like, okay, these parts that are protecting you from the scary stuff can take a little nap and give you some space to be okay or have the courage to see it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've had many a clients who have had the most profound experiences doing it. But you and I also talked about limitations. Now, would this be too large, or if we open this can up right now? But what do you feel the limitations are of it?
Sure. Well, I can try to be concise and just say, again, just like home birth isn't for everybody, neither is our psychedelics. And you have to be intentional with it. And again, preparation is important. And maybe your protective system is not ready to do it. And that has to be an honest conversation. And like that to me is part of the work of getting there. And it's not a magic bullet. So you might have a profound psychedelic experience, and you also need to continue to do the work and integrate the material and do the things and make the behavioral changes to get lasting results from psychedelics.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And I think, as you and I both know, right, the healing journey just never really ends. And I never say that to be daunting or doomsday-ish, but there's always things that we're going to be looking at. And there's always areas in ourselves that we're going to be bringing more awareness, more softening, more compassion. And I have heard often from clients and friends, whether it's deep ayahuasca, DMT, ketamine, MDMA, right? These profound experiences that can be so illuminating and deeply, deeply healing, right? And again, as you're talking about integration, this is such a huge part of it. And also acknowledging in that integration period that life is still funky and messy. And that, because I've often heard people say to me, oh my God, Gina, that part is back. Or that behavior that I thought I had really healed in, ceremony or in the session with the psychedelic therapist. But it's exactly that, right? But it's how do we bring more breath, more space, more compassion to those zones. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that, because I also feel one of the spaces that's tricky right now about psychedelic therapy is this silver bullet. A lot of people sort of feel that.
Yes, it does make me nervous because I don't want that to be a misconception, and then for psychedelics to get a bad name and for us to go backwards.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I oftentimes, when I'm in a consultation call with a client who's asking about psychedelics, I sometimes feel like I'm almost underselling it or not selling it, because I do talk about the drawbacks of it, or how it might not really offer change if you're not willing to be an active participant and get on board with the idea that, just like you said, it's a journey, and sorry, but it doesn't really ever end.
Yeah. Sorry. As two therapists are sitting here and we're like, nope, it doesn't.
That doesn't mean you need to be in therapy your whole life, though.
Good God, no.
No.
I mean, well, maybe I should be. I haven't been in consistent therapy for years. It's like I plug in from time to time. And, I think all of us, you get your tools, you get your different ways of, when the stuff, as I like to call it, just comes up in life.
Yes, exactly. I just went back, for some check-ins.
Yeah, it's a little touch-ups, like getting your roots done, a little tune into your soul, and yes, repressed parts. But okay, so can you just touch on, again, this is another large discussion, but IFS, there's so much buzz around IFS. People can obviously find episodes with, Richard Schwartz, No Bad Parts. So, but if you could maybe give people listening, because I like when I listen to podcasts, I love when I just get like a quick little tool or something where I go, ooh, that's an interesting way to look at myself, or when I'm having a big moment. So can you just explain, if you can, IFS, and then maybe how somebody throughout the day could bring some IFS to themselves, if that's possible. Maybe it's
Sure. Yeah, let me think, because you're right. There's so many podcasts out there
oh yeah.
around IFS, and would definitely recommend one by Richard Schwartz
Yeah.
himself.
Yes.
Well, what I will say is there are some basic beliefs that are IFS. So, I mean, one is that we all have a pure self with a capital S, your intuition, your connection to source, however you want to label it. But we all have that thing in us that is pure good and being. And I think for some people, that in itself might be a big concept to buy into, especially with some religions or philosophies that are that hold this belief that there's original sin, or we're all born broken and need fixing and saving. So depending on where you're at spiritually, that might be something that you have to buy into or work through to even get to. But it's this belief that we all have a core self with a capital S. And then when we feel out of alignment in our lives, it's usually a sign, or it is a sign, that another part or parts of us have taken over. And that's where, when we know we need to start doing some work. So it's normal for us to all have parts. And another belief of IFS is that no part has a bad intention. All parts are good. That is also hard to get on board with, especially if there's a part of you that you don't like, or is like causing chaos in your life, or, is just unwanted. So I think a big thing of IFS is developing self-compassion. So Dick Schwartz talks about, you're in self when you have the 8 C's, and he has all these C words. Let me see if I can try to spit them off right now, because this could also be a helpful tool to check yourself. If you're like, am I in self right now? Remember these 8 C's. So it's courage, clarity, connectedness, compassion, curiosity, what is it? Yeah. Curiosity, clarity, contentment,
Compassion.
compassion, creativity. Did I say that one?
No, that was
If you
okay.
can see things creatively.
Okay.
So there's all these words, and you're in yourself when you're feeling any one or a combination of those
Hmm.
ways.
Hmm.
And if not, like if you're feeling shame or anxiety or depressed or judgment, that's another part of you.
Yes.
You're not soul connected
Mhm.
in that moment.
Mhm.
And so if you can ever just try to step back or zoom out and see the part as not who you are, but rather a part of you that's maybe trying to do something good for your system, you just can't see it that way yet. Try to notice if you can see it from any of those C words. Like if you can see it creatively, or if you can have compassion towards it, or if you can have the courage to even look at it, or the connection to it, and not like acting from, but feeling connected towards,
That's so
that can just help you get some space.
mm-hmm.
Is that helpful? Does that make
Oh
sense?
God, it's so helpful. And I think how I'm gonna like bring it full circle again, something I talked about in the last episode when I was going over just themes that I had noticed in new motherhood, which was a lot of themes, right? And so one theme was, Jonas and I talked about shadow material or parts of ourselves that we just don't like, that having a baby sort of has brought more of a light onto these parts. And we had this long conversation one night about, God, I really don't like that fucking part of myself. And then we each talked about, and this is so funny, like the amount of years that I've been doing therapy, which is not 100 years, but quite a few. And I was like, what do we do with those parts? And at the end of the day, right, it's being with them. It's bringing love to them. I'm reading this book right now, which is called Existential Kink. And
Interesting
by a
title.
psychologist. It's super interesting and fascinating, and it will piss off a lot of people. But what she talks about is that, how do I even, this book is it's heady, not that people can't follow it, but that we take pleasure in, to some degree, keeping these parts okay, how do I want to say this? When we make them conscious, actually playful with these parts. And you could almost be like, okay, so I'm going to speak to my like level of criticism of self, maybe criticism of others, that if I'm to play with that a bit, and if I'm to even get humorous with the idea of that part that developed from childhood wounds, right? So these parts that you're talking about usually have developed from childhood wounds, correct?
100%.
Okay. So in her book, what she talks about, and this was interesting because I think sometimes like I've been so serious in my journey of healing, and not that healing trauma is not serious business, but that also sometimes bringing a level of humor and levity to these parts.
Yes.
It spun something for me that I was like, oh, and she has you do these exercises where you write these things down, or, in a humorous kind of jokey way, and it flips it. So, and she has like science behind it and da 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 da. But yeah. So
yeah, thank you for saying that, because that has been one of my biggest takeaways from my own personal psychedelic journeys, has been not to be so damn serious all the time. Like, you're right. I think trauma, like when we go through trauma, that is heavy.
Yeah.
And it's like, life doesn't have to be so and like heavy. There's lightness, and it's not using humor to deflect and avoid, of course, like that's different. But yes. And I think that's what I think of when I think of this, like the sea of self of creativity. It's like, how do you just be light and playful, and it kind of snaps something, out of us.
Yeah. And that was, as I was reading this book and kind of doing some of the exercises, I was going, whoa, this is profound. Okay, Miss Holly, I could keep going and going with you. But I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions, and since we're kind of short on time, but take as long as you like. But
okay, I'll try to be quick.
they're really light. They're light questions. I'm joking.
Oh, God.
Okay, so this is what I ask everybody. So, why do you think humans are on this earth, and why are you here on this earth?
So light.
And people look at me at the end like, "Are you fucking serious, Gina?"
You have 30
like,
seconds. Go.
Go. Here we go. Yes.
Why am I here on this earth?
Yeah. Why are humans here on this earth, and why are you here? What's some may call it your particular dharma, purpose?
I think we're all here to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
If I can give a one-word answer, evolution. Me personally, I mean, the same thing. I think I'm still figuring that out, really. I think part of it is to heal, and to help and guide others to heal. And yeah, I think it's kind of my soul's journey to just still figure that one out. But I believe in past lives. And so I'm figuring out what I need to learn on this earth.
All right. All right. Okay. Number 2, another very light question. What do you think happens after death? Because it's something as Westerners we don't talk about and we avoid.
Well, at first, I don't know, and I don't claim to know, but I think we go to another realm that I really don't think is that far away from what we on humans already experience. And I believe it's a good place.
Beautiful answers. Okay. Next one. If there was one motto, mantra, something a teacher, supervisor, even client, I mean, I've gotten over the years so many like sentences that ring around my head of something that's like really profoundly impacted how you live life. What would that statement be?
Gosh, Gina, these are so these questions.
I should probably give them to people the day before the interview. Yep, noted, Holly.
Okay, well, this feels like a lot of pressure to give one profound statement that I live by.
Okay, you can give a couple.
I'll just give one because only one is popping into my head, but I'll probably listen back and go, oh, why did I give that one? But my grandma had this plaque in her kitchen that said, "Bloom where you are planted." And then my mom always says it too. And to me, that's just such a reminder that like it's the opposite of the grass is always greener, right? It's like a reminder to just be content with what you have and where you are now and blossom from that. Yeah.
It's amazing. I've heard a lot of different sentences or, sort of things on here. And that's because again, in the Buddhist, right, the comparing mind or the grass is always greener.
Yes.
And just going, bloom where you're planted. I love that. Just appreciate where you are. And even as I listen to you, Holly, in this, like you're such a beautiful human in that you're so talented and smart and great at what you do, but you also have what the Buddhist calls a beginner's mind, which we're supposed to carry throughout the rest of our life, which is just also being open and blooming where you are, not needing to anyways, I could keep going.
Well, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for coming on Spaces Between. And for anybody listening, how can they find you? What would be your main avenues?
Yes, just my website. It's hollyformantherapy.com.
Okay. Amazing.
And I have a social media that's honestly Holly. So that too. I'm not the biggest social media person, but there we go.
God bless.
And thank you for having me. I am honored and I just love and adore you and look up to you in so many ways. And I love your just raw honesty. I think it's contagious.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're such a gift, Holly. And anyone listening, make an appointment with Miss Holly. She's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, babe. Hi, friends. If you've been enjoying Spaces Between, Please take a moment to subscribe, and leaving a review is the cherry on top. Thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting with you next week.